In this video, you and I together are going to be building a multi-step form in React like professionals. Our form is going to span across multiple pages, which means that we need to find an efficient solution to handle the data and to share it across all these different pages and all the edge cases that come along with it. And also as a bonus, at the end of the video, we're also going to be implementing persistence to local storage so that a user can refresh the page and pick up exactly where they left off. Honestly, that sounds super cool and I'm super excited to be doing this, and I hope that you are as well. Now, before we get to that, I just want to very quickly mention something to you. If you haven't heard, I have a free newsletter called Import React, which obviously, as the name implies, is all about React, and you can use it to stay up to date with everything that is going on in the React world, and also get cool tips and tricks that honestly, you won't really find anywhere else. If you're interested, it's completely free, and I'll leave a link for you in the description down below. All right, cool. Let's begin. Let's start building our multi-step form. Now, what we're going to be building today is kind of a simplified onboarding flow, if you will, where the user can enter their name, enter their username and password, and then agree to the terms of service, and then they would have an account, right? We're not going to actually handle the account creation. We're just going to focus on the actual form and managing the data that comes along with it. Now, I just want to say that the actual contents of the form in terms of the individual fields don't really matter for this video, because after all, they're just fields. You just have different types of fields for different forms. What really matters and what's important here is the structure of the form, how we handle the data, and then how we submit the form at the end, even though it's made up of multiple smaller forms. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here inside of app. We are using Nextjs, by the way, but I'm just using this because they make navigation super easy without any extra library, but you don't have to use this. This is purely a React stuff. What I want to do is I want to create here in the app, which is the file-based routing of Nextjs. I want to create here a folder called onboarding. And in here, we're going to create 3 subfolders, one for each of our individual page. So the first one is going to be name, and we're just going to put in here a file called page, which is going to be our page. Then we're going to make another one here called password. That is going to be our page that is going to handle the password. We're going to create a page like this as well. And finally, we're going to put one which is going to be the user name, I believe, because we're going to have the user select the username and then check a box and then submit the entire form as a whole. So page.tsx. Cool. Now we have our pages. Let's just quickly come here and then export something. So we're going to export the default one, and we're going to do the exact same thing with the password. We're going to do export default onboard password page, and then we're going to export the default username page. Let's let cursor do its thing, and there we go. Now we have all of our pages. Cool. So now the next step for us is to come in here outside of the app component, and inside of SRC, I'm going to create a new folder that we're going to call features. This is going to follow a kind of feature-based approach, even though we have just one feature, the onboarding feature. Very simple. We're going to do onboarding. And inside of here, I'm going to create a schema file. So we're going to now define the schema for the entire form. So we're going to do here schema.ts. Now I've gone ahead and installed all of the libraries that we need for this project, but you're going to see them as we go along. So for this, we're going to be using Zot. So we're going to import Z from Zot, and then we're going to create our onboarding schema. So we're going to do export const onboarding schema. And now we need to figure out what exactly do we need to pass to the schema. Now, here's the thing. Here's how we're going to do this. We're going to have one main schema that is going to contain all of the data for all of our forms. Because at the end, this is what we're going to be submitting to our backend, right? We're going to actually just console log this, but you can imagine that we would actually submit this to our backend. This is going to contain all of our data. So we're going to have this schema that contains all of our possible data for all of our forms. And then in each individual form, we're going to use this schema and we're going to pull specific fields from it. And then we're going to create our form based on those fields. That way we define the schema once, and then every form just derives from it, and then we can use individual schemas for each form without having to duplicate any code. So we're going to start and we're going to do username, and we're going to just let Copilot kind of do its thing. Let's see here. We have first name, we have last name, password, repeat password, and then terms. There we go. That looks legit. Terms here is a Boolean, and the only reason why it's doing refine here is because on the actual HTML input, we're not going to get a real Boolean. So we just need to refine this and convert it to a Boolean. But this is actually the correct schema. Again, it doesn't really matter too much what type of data we put here, just that we have a schema and that we have one schema and that we're going to use the schema in all of our forms. Then we're going to come here and export the type of our schema. So we're going to infer the type from Zod using z.infer and then passing the schema. And now we have the schema available across our project, which you're going to see we are going to use. Cool. So now it's time to start creating our first form. So let's come in here inside of features onboarding. We're going to create a new folder here called components. And inside of here, we're going to do onboarding name form.tsx like this, and we're just going to do export, and then we're going to do function onboarding name form, and that is going to be our actual form. So now the first thing that we need to do is we need to create the local schema that is only for the onboarding name. So which parts of our form is the onboarding name form going to be responsible for? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do const and then onboarding name schema. And here, instead of doing z.object and then retyping everything that we put in the main schema, I am instead going to import the main schema. So we're going to do here onboarding schema, we're going to import it, and then we're going to pick from it, and see here, we're going to pick the first name and then the last name. Just like in TypeScript, you can actually in Zod, you can pick things or you can omit things from a schema. We're doing the exact same thing here. We're creating the onboarding name schema, and we're using these two properties here, which means that whatever we defined here in this main schema, like the first name and last name, that is exactly what we're going to have in this form here, which makes this very efficient. Then we're going to come here and then use the type, but now we're actually not going to export this type because we want this to be local to this component, because no other form is going to be using this specific type. And finally, we just need to import z from Zod, and now we have our schema. Then we need to come here and we need to create our form, which we're going to be using React hook form for this. So I'm going to do const form equals use form, and then just let Copilot cursor, I keep saying Copilot cursor, do all of the thing for us, which honestly is exactly what I would do. Do I not have this? Do I not have this? Let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure. I just reinstalled it and now it works. So we're just going to use the traditional Zod resolver here, and we're going to pass the name of the schema itself, actually, rather. And if you're unfamiliar with this, then I would recommend that you check out my React hook form video, which goes over all of this in great detail. So now we have our form. Then we're just going to do our handle submit function, which for now is not going to do anything. We're going to do here const on submit. There we go. We have our handle submit function that is going to receive the data, which is the onboarding name schema. And now we're going to console log the data. And then for our actual form, I'm just going to come here and paste some markup that I have. Again, we're going to go over it. It's nothing too complex. I'm just going to import all of these components from the UI folder, which, by the way, you're going to have access to this repository in the description. So you're going to see all of the components that we have. This is just Chatcien components. We're using the form components from them, and I'm just rendering form for each individual field, right? So we have the form here. We're giving it some classes. We're giving this on submit, the handle submit function, and then we're doing first name, right, which is a field, and then we're putting some labels here and then some descriptions, and we're doing the exact same thing with the username. Now, because we are using onSubmit here, and because we are using Next.js, we have to come in here at the top, and we have to put use client because we are working in a client environment. And just like that, let's see if the application is running. It is running. Let's see what our name page is here. It is onboarding/name. So if we just need to maybe put the form over here. So let's come here and let's do onboarding name form, and we're going to import this form here. Now, if we actually go to our app over here and we go to /onboarding/name, and we should see our form over here, and there we go, our form is here and it actually works. I can press here and then we get some errors, and then I can just type something here like John and then Doe, and we get no errors, and we can then submit it, and it should console log the data to our console. There you go. The first step of our form actually works. Cool. So now the next thing that we want to do is we actually want to push to the next form, which is going to be the password form here after we have console log the data in this case. We're going to see after that what we do with the data, but for now, let's just submit the form and navigate to the next page. For that, in Next.js, you're going to use the router, which is going to be const router use router. We're going to import this directly from next/navigation. This requires you to be in a client component for it to work. And then here we're just going to do router.push and then onboarding / and here it's going to be password like this. Password. There we go. So after we submit the form, which this function is only going to get called whenever the form is submitted with valid values, then we're going to submit here to the actual password to handle the next form. Now, after we did this, what we can actually do is we can come in here and take all of this code and we can just create the next form, which is going to be almost identical. So in here, we're going to do onboarding password form.tsx, and here we're going to paste all of this code, and now we're just going to change here name, and I'm going to let Copilot kind of do everything, where instead of the name and first name, the first name and last name, we're going to get password and then confirm password. And then I'm just going to change all of these here, and let's just tab, tab, tab. This is what I love about Cursor. I can just tab and it fixes everything and it goes across multiple lines. Now we do have an error here. We don't have a confirmed password. Let's go back to our schema because it is repeat password. That's fine. We can just change this to repeat password and see now Cursor knows. As soon as you visit the file, it knows the actual, it has very good memory. So now we did the exact same thing with the password form. And again, there's nothing different here. It's just more of the same thing. And now the only thing that we have to do is on navigation, we have to go here to the username form. So it's going to be username. And that's it. That's the only change that we had to do. Keep in mind, we're not sharing the data at all. All of these forms are individual forms in individual pages. We're not doing anything with the data yet. We're going to do that as the next step. Then we're going to go here to, it is password. And here we're just going to use the form. There we go. Copilot knows it got my inputs. Perfect. Then we're going to take all of this here and we're going to create our final form, which is going to be our onboarding username form.tsx. And we're going to paste everything here. And now let's go through the same thing again. Let's go all of this here. Tab, 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 tab to infinity, right? I'm tabbing as fast as I can. Copilot, hey, what did you do? Come on. I know what it's doing. It's trying to remove a field because we don't have a field. Actually, if I go here, let's just rename this to the username schema. We want to get also the terms, which is going to be a Boolean here. Now it's going to know what the terms are. And here, can it do this? Can it figure out checkbox? And we're going to import checkbox. There you go. It can figure this out. And we don't need a form description here. We don't need a form label. No, we do. We do. Yeah, there's actually some changes that we need to make here. So let me just copy the changes just because, again, it makes this really, really easy. So we're just going to copy the changes and we are going to paste all of these. And there we go. We just used the checkbox instead of the input field, the text input field, which again, it doesn't really matter what the individual fields are. What matters is how we're handling the form. This is just another checkbox component, which comes directly from Nextjs, and you'll be able to find them in the components/UI folder. They are all here. Cool, so now I think this form is complete. So we have onboarding username, we're getting the username and the terms. We have the schema here, we put some default values. Now here on the onSubmit, there's no more other form to push to. So we're going to remove this and then we're going to remove over here the router because all we're going to do is we're going to console log the data and we should console log all of the data that includes the data of the other forms. So that's our next step. How do we handle that? So when you think of data, right, we have 3 individual forms. They live on 3 individual pages. I believe I did not put it here in the page, so we're just going to put it here, and there we go, onboarding username form. We have 3 individual forms, 3 individual pages. There's no context that is being shared between the pages, so we need to now implement that in some sort of way and share the data across the different pages, and then, as I promised you, also persist it to local storage and then refresh it whenever we refresh the page to plug it directly in our state. Now, there are multiple ways that we could go about doing this, but honestly, the simplest way that is going to accomplish all of this for us is going to be to use Zustand, which is a state management library that we can now implement and then put all of our data as we complete each form. So we're going to come in here to onboarding and we're going to make here a new file that we're going to call store.ts, just like this. And in here, we're going to first define our state for our store. So we're going to use TypeScript. So we're going to type onboarding store, and I'm going to call this state because this is going to be state. And this now is going to be a partial of this schema here, of this type here, because it may or may not contain these properties. Obviously, we want all of them to be there at the last form, but we're going to need to ensure that manually ourselves. We're not going to ensure that at the type level. At the type level, right, on the first form, we're not going to have any of these properties. So we need a partial of all of this onboarding schema so that we can just plug things at will partially as we complete each form. So we're going to do a partial onboarding schema, and we also need a function that is going to update that schema, which is going to be set data. And here we're going to take data onboarding schema. Again, we're going to do a partial of the onboarding schema, and we're just going to import the schema here, right? So we have our state, we pass it the partial onboarding schema, and then a function to set that schema, to set that data in the state. And then we create our store here, right? We have the create hook from Zustand, we get the set function, and here we have set data, and we actually don't have a data property here. It messed up. We just have Cursor actually messed up. There's an extra parenthesis here that shouldn't be, right? There we go. Now it's correct, right? So our onboarding store takes that and then just sets the data. And again, everything's partial. We don't need to specify anything else. Cool. This should also be used because this is going to be a custom hook that we can use. Cool. So now let's go here to our first form. And what we want to do is essentially super simple. On submit, we just want to store the data that we have. We want to store it in the state so that we can have it then at the end of the form when we submit the form, right? It's pretty simple. So we're going to come in here at the top and we're just going to do const set data use onboarding store, and then we're going to get the set data function from use onboarding store, and then we are just going to do set data and then data, and honestly we don't even need to console log anything. That is it. Now at this point, whenever this form submits, we have our data and it is going to be stored in our Zustand store, which means that, you guessed it, we can come back here to the password form and we can do exactly the same thing. So we're going to use this, we're going to import this here, and then we're going to replace our console log with set data. And again, we're going to go to the next form. Now on this last form, we actually don't need to set the data because this is the last step in the form. At this point, when we submit this form, we should theoretically clear the data so that if we want to go back through this form again, we have to restart with fresh data. So there's nothing to do here in terms of setting the data. However, what we do need to do is we need to get the data from the Zustand store and then combine it with the data that we have here from this form and then send that all together to the backend, which means for us, we just want to console log all of that data. So we're going to come in here at the top and we're going to do const first name, onboarding, last name, and then let's see, can it do password? Come on, cursor, you can do it. Const repeat password, and I believe we have const username, and then const terms, and we have all of these here. Again, you're free to kind of get the data however you want. You can put all of this in a custom hook. You can refine this if you want. That's not really the point. The point is that we have this data over here, that we now have all of the data for the form in this last form. And then here, we just want to log an object here that is going to spread data, and then is going to spread all of these other properties, right? Data, first name, last name, repeat password, username, and terms. So let's test this out. Let's come here to our form, and then let's go here. And now we're going to do John and then Doe, right? And we're going to press next over here. Then we are going to actually, yeah, this is a bit confusing. Let's change that since we're here. Let's go back to the onboarding password form. This should not be password, right? We're not going to put any, actually, we're going to do this. This, and then we're also going to do type, and that is going to be password, and we're going to do the exact same thing here, right? So this is a little bit clearer, right? Now we're going to do a password. So 123 123 123 123 123 123. We're going to go next, and now we're at the username form, and here we have John Doe, and we can then select this. Our UI is a bit funky, we can change that. But now if I press next over here, now we should see, something went wrong. We don't have username, terms, first name. Aha, I realized my mistake, right? This is obvious. We're also spreading the username here and the terms, which we shouldn't because we already have them in the data here. So this was actually overwriting our data. So if we just remove this, now this should be okay. We can now clear the console. We can log this again. And there we go. We have John Doe 123, our password, the terms, and the username. And now we can submit all of this to our backend. There you go. Our multi-step form works, at least partially. And I say partially because now if we refresh the page, well, we lost all of our state because our state is not persisted. And if I do here John Doe, even though this form might be fine, we can then submit it. And you're going to see here, we have all of this data that's missing, but this form has no context of the data. So how do we fix it? Well, first we're going to fix it by making all of this persistent to local storage with Zustand, which is going to be theoretically pretty simple. I'm going to tell you why I'm saying this in just a moment. And then what we also want to do is if we ever actually try to go to the page manually of a specific form, like here, if we just take this URL and we reload this URL and we try to go here, we want to actually, if there's no data in the local storage for the previous steps of the form, we just want to go back to the first step of the form and force the user to just fill in that data. So we're going to do that. But first, let's actually implement the persistence. And here I'm going to do something which I would do in real life, to be very honest. And I polled you guys and you guys said that you wanted to take a look at more AI stuff. So I'm just going to let cursor actually do this and see how far it can actually come with making this persistent, right? So first, let's maybe remove the unnecessary things, the less dead code or things that cursor has to actually look at, the better. And here I'm just going to actually, a tip for you, you can just speak to cursor. I'm just going to use the voice recorder on my Mac and just speak to it directly and let it do its work. implement persistence in the Zustand store, and I believe you may have to use a middleware for that, but just do it. Write simple code, write senior level code, and just do the simplest solution possible. Press enter and let's see what it does. It is going to read some files, and we want to target here the store file, and here it should just add the persist. The reason I'm doing this is I have used persist before, but I haven't used it in a while, and I don't remember the exact details of how to use it, and it's easier for me to just ask Copilot, cursor again, sorry, instead of going through the documentation myself and trying to figure that out. Right, and I can just look at this code here and I can kind of tell that this is correct, even though this is maybe a bit embarrassing because it's super simple. I know it's super simple. I never made this out to be complicated, but now we have persist here and this looks correct. It imported this from the Zustand middleware. It used persist and now it put actually a name over here, and then it did the storage create JSON storage, which honestly, I guess is legit, right? I've tried this before without it, but we can even leave this here. So now theoretically, as we actually get our data from Zustand, right, it should, as we update the data, it should be persisted to local storage. So let's see if that actually works, right? Let's actually test this out. So let's go back here to, I believe it's name. This is our first step. And then let's do John Doe. And now let's save this. Let's go to password 123 123 123 123 123. And then let's go here to John. Let's reload the page. And now we're going to do John Doe. And here, if I press submit, will we get our data? We get our data, right? John Doe 123 123 123 terms and then username. Perfect. That works. Cool. So now the last step that we want to do is actually, if we had reloaded this page and we actually did not have some data in local storage, we want this to actually redirect us back to the main page, back to the first form. For that, I'm just going to go here to the application and actually clear the data here. I believe, is it like, oh my God, I can't see anything. Where is the onboarding storage? I'm just going to delete this. And now we should have no data in our local storage, which means that if we reload the page after we implement our functionality, it will now redirect us back to the first form. And the way that we do that is actually super simple, but there is one caveat that you need to be aware about. So first of all, on the onboarding name form, there's nothing to do. This is the first form, so we are good. We can just skip this. On the password form, we need to first check that the first name and the last name, which are the values from this form, that we have some value in them. Otherwise, we're going to redirect to the first form. So for that, we're going to come in here and do const first name and then last name. We're just going to get those. And then if those are not there, we are just going to redirect. Because we're working in a client component, we have to use this in a use effect, but we also have to check the actual store if it has hydrated yet. And I'm going to show you in just a moment. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do use effect. We're going to import this from React. And here we're going to do a dependency array. And here we're going to pass, I believe, first name, last name, set data, because we are actually, no, we're not going to do set data. We're going to do the router. Sorry, we're going to do the router because we need the router. And then we are going to check in here. We're going to do if we don't have a first name or we don't have a last name, we are going to go back to the onboarding name over here. Now, if we just do it like this, you're going to see that it's not going to work. It is going to work if I go here to password, right? It is going to redirect me directly to the name. But if I put something in the name over here, John Doe like this, and I go to next, you're going to see that when I reload, it is still going to put me to the name, even though I have an actual values in here. And the reason for that is because if you go here to the store, the way that Zustand works when you persist data, it is going to be undefined on the first render, and then it is going to hydrate the data with the data from local storage, which means that we need to wait until this has hydrated, which honestly sounds more complicated than it is. It just means that we come here to our password form, and then we just also have to we have to come in here and we have to do if use onboarding store dot persist dot has hydrated. If this has not hydrated, we're just going to return here and not execute anything in this function. And then we're just going to pass it here, use onboarding store dot persist dot has hydrated as a dependency. So if the store has not hydrated, we're not going to do anything. If it has, and then we still don't have data, then are we going to redirect to the onboarding. So now if we test this, we can come back here to password, and then we can see, and we're going to see that we are no longer redirected because now our data is waiting until it is being hydrated. Cool, that works. So let's do the exact same thing now on the username. So here we have all of the data here, right? So we need to check for all of these fields here. And if they are not here, then we need to redirect. We're also going to need the router. So we're going to do the router here. We're going to import the router from Next Navigation. And again, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We are going to create a use effect over here and come on cursor. There you go. You know exactly what I want. We're just going to import this here. There you go. If has hydrated is false, we're going to return. If any of these are not there after hydration, we're going to go back and it's not going to be to the password, it's going to be to the name. And then we pass all of these dependencies and now our form is complete. So now we can guarantee that no matter where we actually go in the form, if we go manually or whatever we do, we're always going to have data and we can never submit this form unless we have the actual proper data fully there in the state. So there you go. We now completed a multi-step form. It was a little bit lengthy. There was kind of a lot of meat to this video, but I think that it was useful because we covered a lot of stuff and we covered a lot of edge cases that go beyond the kind of beginner level, which is kind of what I want to do for my channel in this year going forward. So I really hope that you've enjoyed that. Once again, you're going to be able to find this repository as it currently is right now in the description. So if you're curious, check that out, play around with this, make sure that you understand all of this. And now you know how to build a multi-step form in React. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more videos just like this one, make sure to leave this video a big thumbs up. You can also click here to subscribe, or you can click here to watch a different video of mine that YouTube seems to think that you're really going to enjoy. And with that being said, my name has been Darius Cousin. This is Cousin Solutions. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Ciao, ciao.